All right. Good morning, class. Welcome to week number 6. That is right, week number 6 of your 9443 class, which is your academic libraries class. As always, I am your professor, Dr. James K. Austin. And what we will do this week is we will have a few course updates toward the beginning, and then I am going to turn it over to my former boss here. This is Jennifer Hughes, and she is going to speak to you all a little bit about just hours and what some of the different, well, for one thing, how pandemics and other things can affect the hours of operation of your library. But then also, she oversaw a change within the Coastal Carolina University Library to a 24/7 full service model at one point, and she can talk about that process and some of the pros and cons and things of that nature. So I'm going to allow her to, just share some knowledge and some experiences about that. And I may have a question or two for her afterwards. We'll see. But first, just for course updates, be on the lookout for a few announcements from me regarding these course readings. I am seeing some messages that the course readings are giving people this week a few access problems, and so I do need to troubleshoot, look into that, and get that fixed. So I will be doing that. Um, I have started reviewing the academic library website reviews. So far, they are mostly good. I'm very pleased with what's going on. However, please pay attention to the feedback that I give you all on those assignments, because if you did not perform up to task, I have given you some feedback as to why that is. And so hopefully on your next written submission, which will be in October, I believe somewhere around October the 18th or something like that. But it's mid-October, so you still got a while. But we just want to make sure we clean up any mistakes before the next assignments come in. And that's pretty much all we have for course updates this week. There will be a little more next week. But without further ado, I am going to turn things over to Jennifer. And she's got a presentation, and she will be teaching you all a few things about hours and some things that you may not have considered before when deciding or when thinking about the hours of operation at an academic library. So, just as a brief introduction, Jennifer Hughes is the assistant university librarian for Coastal Carolina University near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And she was also the person who hired me into a librarian position at Coastal Carolina a few years ago. Coastal was my last appointment before moving to Missouri and taking on this job. So thank you for joining us, Jennifer, and I will turn the floor over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me come on. And I've got a PowerPoint slide here that I'm going to try to share. And all right, I think that got it on. And the first thing that I want to talk about is where we were. So our library here at Coastal is has been a 24-hour full-service library. But I want to go in our time machine a little bit and talk about how we got there. And so in 2008, long ago, we had kind of traditional library hours where we were open until 2 a.m. basically. And that was working for us, and we were doing some surveys, and students said that they wanted to extend hours, but when asked directly, they said, well, but I probably wouldn't come during those overnight hours. So we decided to hire some part-time staff. And so from 2008 to 2009, all we did was hire some part-time staff to fill that gap between 2 a.m. and 7:30 in the morning, so that we could try out overnight hours at Coastal. And the time we were building an addition to our library. We were building a information commons that was about 50% the size of our library. And so with expanding the services that we were going to be providing and expanding the library facility, we thought that the idea of expanding our hours was a good thing to try out. And so we essentially went 24/5 in 2009. And then in 2012, when that new facility opened, we went 24/7. And that was a big deal for us. At the time, we were the first 24/7 library in the state of South Carolina. And we really spent a lot of time trying to figure out what that looked like. And one of the things that I want to mention is that when we initially went to those overnight hours, we had no desire to be full service. We thought that we would hire some people to work in the overnight hours and just kind of keep the building open, make sure that students were the only ones entering, and if somebody wanted to check out something, they would put that item on the hold shelf and come back in the morning and check it out. So we didn't offer any services. That lasted about a week for us. What we found was that our overnight staff were spending 5 or 6 steps to put an item on the hold shelf versus just checking it out. It's a 1-2 step process to check out something. It's a 5 or 6 step process to put it on the hold shelf. And so as students were coming in, apparently this is going to be surprising for some of you. If it's 3 a.m. and you have found yourself in the library, it's because you're there for a purpose. There's something going on. There's something that you need. And so it made sense for our staff to be trained in just doing everything they could to support the students who were in the building at that time. So we went full service. For us, that meant that all of our student spaces were open. Students had a card swipe to enter the building, but they then had access to all of our study rooms, all of our computers, all of our seats. That also allowed students, I've moved on. That also allowed students to check out materials. They could check out laptops. They could check out course reserves that they needed for their classes. We trained our overnight staff on providing basic reference and being in touch with the reference and instruction librarians in the day so that they could assist with the assignments that were being conducted at that time. We had staff performing ILL processing. Really, the stack maintenance was a huge deal. Prior to going 24/7, we were having a lot of our shelving and shelf reading happening in the middle of the day when there was a lot of activity. So having those activities move to the nighttime hours when it was less busy really helped us better staff our service points. It also allowed for things like having the nighttime deposits be prepared, having the statistical reports be prepared right after midnight. And a lot of the things that they were doing really cleared up time that was being spent during our busy portion of the day and moved those tasks to the nighttime hours. So they were able to help with marketing. They were able to help the library instruction team. Really, we joke about how they were like little elves in the night because we would leave in the day and be like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. And by the time we came back the next morning, the staff had cleared up stuff, made things better, shelved all of the books, checked out things, done inventory of our collection to make sure all of the laptops were in place or checked out. So it was really helpful for us. There were obviously benefits for the students. Students had ease of access to the building. They knew we were open. And if they came in, they had qualified staff available to assist them. And for me as a supervisor, it was really easy because when we were open 7:30 to 2 a.m., we had some weird shifts because that's not exactly 2 shifts worth of employees. It's like 2.5. And you had some people working odd hours like 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. or 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And so this really alleviated that. That allowed us to get to 3 shifts where you're operating day shift, evening shift, overnight shift. There's a little bit of overlay for staff to communicate with each other. Worked out pretty well for us. Worked out well for our students. And with that, there were quite a bit of challenges that some of them were foreseen and some of them were not. For us, being really the only 24-hour department on campus was a huge challenge. We were, I say that we were like the beacon in the middle of the night. Our new facility is completely covered in glass and all the lights are on in the middle of the night. And so as you drive through campus, we're like, hey, the library's open. And so as students drove through campus, they knew that there was an adult staff member available to assist them in the library. And so we had quite a few interesting and traumatic experiences, especially that first semester, it seems like, where students were having medical issues or a mental crisis, and they came into the library because they knew that we were available to assist them. Librarian by trade, not counselor, not first responder, not emergency room qualified. And so we actually went through quite a bit of training. We met with counseling services and said, what do we do in the middle of the night? We met with public safety. We all got CPR and first aid certified, just looking for every training that was available. We've now taken the emotional health certification as well, first aid for mental health, so that we can assist students in the middle of the night until help is available. Obviously, our first answer is to call 911, or it is to call the counselor on campus that's on call. But it takes time for that person to get here. It takes a good 30 minutes for somebody to wake up and get dressed and drive out here to assist in crisis situations sometimes. So at least preparing staff for how to handle that was huge. That was a much bigger issue than we were anticipating as far as the training that we needed.
Okay.
When you look at who's on campus in the middle of the night, it's probably a couple of public safety officers. And in our case, that was it. There was somebody in housing and there was somebody in public safety. And so knowing that ITS is not available to us, at least on our campus, facilities maintenance wasn't available. So when we smelled gas in the middle of the night, we had to evacuate the building and then call and wait on facilities crews again to get dressed and come to campus. So that was a little bit of a challenge for us to learn, especially on those first couple of hiccups along the way. So I mentioned staff training needs, really broad spectrum there. Another challenge is dependability of staff. It's really hard to find part-time, hourly staff to work overnights for a very small amount of money. And to have them come and be dependable staff that you want to leave in charge of your facility. So that was a challenge for us. And another challenge for us really was that low usage. We were 24/7, mostly for us. That was a marketing ploy from our university administration. When we opened the new facility, they really wanted to showcase that we had an information commons and we were open 24/7. And so we talked to administration a couple of times and said, look, nobody's in here on Friday and Saturday night. This is really a waste of money. And they said, no, it's not. It's not a waste of money because we're 24/7 and nobody else is. So that was a little bit of a challenge. And The other piece is this, that there's no rest time. When we opened August 16th, we were 24 hours until Thanksgiving. And so there was never a point that you could just, the library's closed. Let me take a minute, or let's rearrange some furniture. Always open, always busy. And we found some creative ways to communicate between the staff. We used an alias email that went to all of the access services staff who were working the 24 hours. We also used our library alias. We used When to Work, which is a platform for student assistance scheduling, but we also used it for communicating what was happening with our student assistants that we were supervising, so that as students worked different shifts with different supervisors, everyone was informed of any supervision challenges that there may be. So 24/7 looked like it was in place for always. And then COVID hit, and much like other schools, we went ahead and closed our doors. So the middle of March 2020, we locked our doors. We had staff working inside the library, still checking out laptops, mailing laptops, going out to the curb to drop off laptops to people as they came by. We moved all of our services online. We started scanning copies of chapters and books for people, which was not a service that we had provided prior to COVID. So I think a lot of our COVID response was similar to other institutions. But when we came back in fall of 2020, we actually at Coastal had a reduction in force. And so during that time, we lost 4 of our access services staff members, which is essentially what we had working an overnight shift. And so when we reopened in fall of 20, we simply went back to just having 2 shifts of employees. We had our staff coming in at 7:30, and we had them leaving at 10 o'clock. And we had card swipes on our door to only allow Coastal faculty, staff, and students to enter the building. And not a lot has changed this semester either. We are still down those positions. And so we have extended the capabilities of our first and second shift. We have gone from being 24 hours a day to now closing at midnight and having limited hours on Friday and Saturday night. The hours that we currently have, if you will remember, back in 2008, long ago, we were open until 2 a.m. So this is even further reduced than when we started 24 hours. So it's right now, it's working for us. We're keeping an eye out to see how long we can sustain midnight. In our minds, we kind of think that 2 a.m. is where we're eventually going to have to go. But 2 a.m. again presents some of those scheduling conflicts. Right now, our entire second shift arrives at 3:30 and they work until midnight. If we extend to 2, then you start having to have some gap coverage. And the things that we're looking at 7:30 in the morning, I count how many people are waiting for us. Usually by 7:15, I'm like, oh, there's already 2 people outside. Let's open the door early. But back in the day, especially on like Sunday afternoons opening at 2 o'clock, we would have 15, 20 people outside. That's a problem. You need to adjust your hours when you have that many people standing outside. But for us, 1 or 2 people may or may not be an issue for extending hours. We also look at how many people we're kicking out at closing to see if we're closing at the right hours. We're constantly monitoring our head counts and our door counts and kind of seeing what students are doing while they're in here. Because right now we are actually in the process of building a library learning complex that's going to go in our parking lot that we have now. And it's going to be about the same size as our library and information commons. So we're doubling our space. And in that space, we're talking about what our service looks like and if it's possible that that building may be unstaffed for part of the time. And so we're looking at what students are doing. Do they just need a space to study? Do they need access to computers? Do they need access to a library staff member while they're in here? And we've considered some alternatives. There's areas that you can support, like having the online chat available from an outside provider who's not necessarily a staff member at our library. So we're looking at some of the alternatives that we can use. For us right now, we're keeping a close eye on what our peer and aspirants are doing. We're seeing what the other big players in South Carolina are doing, because we certainly don't want to be trying to extend our hours if nobody else is doing that. So trying to do what's best for our students, but also being aware of what's happening in the library industry in general. So I think that, that is about all that I have for information going out. But it's been, hours is definitely a challenge, and what services to provide during those hours, for sure.
All right, excellent. Yeah, so because I hadn't thought about a lot of those considerations that you ended up having to kind of process as you were making changes to get to 24/7 and as you were trying to adjust for COVID and those sorts of things. So I appreciate that. I do have a few questions that I want to ask. For one, this is something that I think will be of interest to my students. Do you, when, okay, so during those after hours, particularly on the third shifts, you were providing full service. Now, did you have a reference librarian 24/7, or were you using staff help even for reference and that sort of thing during those second and third shifts?
Right. Yeah. That has evolved over the process. We actually had librarians here until 9 p.m. And then at some point in time, librarians were here Sunday through Thursday until 9 p.m. And then for us, the focus really changed to utilizing the librarians for instruction, for the one-shot instruction courses, for the LIBR semester-long courses. And we moved to a model where the librarians were spending more of their time doing research consultations by appointment. So our access services staff took over the training for your basic reference service and answering questions as far as they could within their own level of knowledge, and then recognizing when it was time to set the person up with an appointment. And as you know, when you're on that help desk, there's a big difference between the student who's kind of, oh, I'm starting this research project and I have plenty of time, versus the student who you might see on second and third shift who needs all of the help that you can give them now because it is due by midnight, it is due by their 8 o'clock class period. And so sometimes our staff at the desk had to go a little further and maybe learn with the student at that desk as they are just trying to get the student some kind of information so they can knock out a project or paper by 8 a.m. So a little of both.
All right, thank you. And then also, I think, and you probably went over this in the presentation, and I just kind of lost it or forgot or something. But when you were 24/7, was there any point during the day where access was restricted at that time just to CCU personnel as opposed to anyone in the public coming in, or could the entire public come 24/7?
Right. Yeah. So we are definitely open to our community users, but during those hours of 2 a.m. to 7 a.m., for us it was really important to lock that down for card swipe only. And we ended up extending that, I believe, to midnight to 7 a.m., just because you want to know who your population is in the middle of the night. And we also wanted to limit, when you're open 24 hours a day, you can live here. And so that was one of the things as we looked at mental health crisis and those things, students in need. There's a difference between somebody who is a night owl or an early bird, or somebody who ends up pulling an all-nighter one time versus somebody who's actually living here. And so for us, having the card swipe also made it a little bit better for us to ensure that no community people may be coming in the night that we're looking for somewhere to stay, which we didn't have that issue at all, thank goodness. But we did have a couple of students that we ended up referring to housing and to the Dean of Students office for some additional support.
All right, thank you. And the last question that I have for you is, if you were to hear about, like, let's say hypothetically that there was a library considering a switch to 24/7, and they heard about you and they decided they were going to call you and get some feedback from you as far as what things they should consider as they weigh whether or not they're going to make that move. What advice would you have for them, positive and negative, as far as things that they should just consider and keep in mind when trying to make a decision as to whether they would go 24/7?
Well, I mean, there's so much, and it's interesting because very few libraries are 24/7 full service. So many libraries that are 24/7, which is rare in its own, are the libraries that are 24/7 usually have security come in during those overnight hours, or non-library personnel in the building. But for us, I really feel like it was an advantage. We decided to use library staff during the overnight hours, and so because we employed them, make the best of it. Like, see what you can do with the stuff you have and use their skill set. I never imagined that we would get to a point that we would have so much activity being completed by our staff members during those overnight hours. And so I would say that my biggest piece of advice is to look at all of the activities that are happening in your library and determine when they are best suited. Should you be trying to shift your collection when you have 500 people in the building? Or maybe should you do that when you have 5 people in the building? How can you best utilize the staff that you have available? For us, we were very fortunate for security reasons that we decided that we would put a whole bunch of employees on that overnight. And we probably could have gotten by with hiring one staff member, but we didn't feel comfortable with that scenario. And so we had two staff members. And we're like, well, if one person wants the day off and the other person calls out sick, they should have the same luxury as a daytime person. And so it kind of expanded till we got to the point of having 3 people on the shift, no matter which shift it was, as a minimum. And that for us worked really well. Having the staff that are in your building trained to do any task that comes their way, having them have that ownership of their shift and their duties, it made it a lot better. When you're hiring somebody to work overnights and telling them, hey, just sit here and make sure the building doesn't burn down, you kind of get what you get. And we had some employees who, would come in and they have no task, which means that they have nothing to do. And so, it's not easy to stay awake in the middle of the night, period. It's certainly not easy to stay awake in the middle of the night when you don't have anything to keep you awake. And so we just found as much as we could to put onto our nighttime people that would be stimulating to them, that would be a benefit to the university, would be a benefit to the library, and it worked out really well for us.
All right, thank you. Before I stop the recording, is there anything else that you wanted to mention? Or, well, I'll open the floor and just open it to you if there's anything else you wanted to close with. And from there, I will thank you, but I will let you speak first. So.
The only thing that I can think of is I never imagined a world where we wouldn't remain 24/5 at least. Like I said, there wasn't much news on Friday and Saturday night, but I assumed that we would be 24/5. And so for me, I'm constantly monitoring those hours, but then I look and I'm like, well, Walmart in our area isn't 24 hours right now, and I never imagined a time that Walmart wouldn't be either. And so I think that we're still on this coming out of the pandemic, hopefully coming out and seeing what our new normal is. And I think it's really exciting to have this opportunity to look at hours and keep it in the front of our minds as we're moving forward and making sure that we're meeting the needs of our students. So thank you very much for inviting me on. This has been great.
Yes, thank you, and I would say this might not be the last time I invite you onto something because I always use my people resources as much as I can, and I know that my students appreciate that. So I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon, and well, yeah, this has been great. So students, keep that in mind. That is stuff that a lot of times when you hear people say, I didn't learn that in library school, when this is part of what people are often not learning in library school, and I want you all to have fewer of those instances. So I appreciate having Jennifer come and talk so that can demystify some of the I guess some of the questions you might have around or uncertainty you might have around how academic libraries establish what hours they're going to operate and who can be in the building when and what services will be offered at what time. So definitely thank you for that, Jennifer. And with that, I'm going to let you all go and I will see you all in week 7. Thank you so much. Jennifer, if I can get you to just hold on for a second.